Good morning, everybody. We are starting today with the Vishnu Mahapurana, the start of Skandha 6, the sixth and final Skandha. Maitreya said to his guru Parashara, "You have narrated to me, illustrious sage, the creation of the world, the genealogies of the patriarchs, the duration of the Manvantaras, and the dynastics of princes in detail. I am now desirous to hear from you an account of the dissolution of the world, the season of total destruction, and that which occurs at the expiration of the Kalpa." So he's here referring to two different kinds of great dissolution. So the first one, he says, is the season of total destruction. That's the one that takes place at the end of the life of Brahma, which is called what the Sanskrit that Maitreya used was the Mahapralaya or Prakrita Pralaya. And then the one that occurs at the expiration of the Kalpa, what he calls it is the Upasanhriti. The commentator on the Vishnu Purana also calls it the Atyantikalaya, or the destruction which is not the end, literally, the lesser destruction. Parashara said, "Hear from me, Maitreya, exactly the circumstances of the end of all things, and the dissolution that occurs, either at the expiration of a kalpa, the lesser destruction, or that which takes place at the close of the life of Brahma, the greater destruction. A month of mortals is a day and night of the Pitris. A year of mortals is a day and night of the Devas. Twice 1,000 aggregates of the 4 yugas is a day and night of Brahma. The 4 yugas are the Krita, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali, comprehending to get together 12,000 years of the Devas. There are an infinite succession of these 4 yugas, of a similar description, the first of which is always called the Krita and the last the Kali. In the first, the Krita, is that age which is created by Brahma. In the last, which is the Kali Yuga, a dissolution of the world occurs." Maitreya said, "Venerable sir, you are able to give me a description of the nature of the Kali Yuga, in which 4-footed Dharma suffers total extinction." Parashara said, "Hear, Maitreya, an account of the nature of the Kali Yuga, respecting which you have inquired and which is now close at hand. The observance of Varna, order, and institutes will not prevail in the Kali Yuga, nor will that of the ceremonials enjoyed by the Sama, Rik, and Yajur Vedas. Marriages in this age will not be conformable to the ritual, nor will the rules that connect the guru and his disciple be in force. The laws that regulate the conduct of husband and wife will be disregarded, and oblations to the gods with fire will no longer be offered. A powerful and rich man, in whatever family he may be born, will be held entitled to espouse maidens of every tribe. A regenerate man will be initiated in any way whatever, and such acts of penance as may be performed will be unattended by any results. Every text will be scripture that people choose to think so. All gods will be gods to them that worship them, and all orders of life will be common alike to all persons. In the Kali Yuga, fasting, austerity, liberality, practiced according to the pleasure of those by whom they are observed, will constitute righteousness. Pride of wealth will be inspired by very insignificant possessions. Pride of beauty will be prompted by no other charm than fine hair. Gold, jewels, diamonds, clothes will all have perished, and then hair will be the only ornament with which women can decorate themselves. Wives will desert their husbands when they lose their property, and only they who are wealthy will be considered by women as their lords. He who gives away much money will be master of men, giving away money as in bribery and such. And family descent will no longer be a title of supremacy. Accumulated treasures will be expended on ostentatious dwellings. The minds of men will be wholly occupied in acquiring wealth, and this wealth will be spent solely on selfish gratifications. Women, too, will follow their inclinations and be ever fond of pleasure. Men will fix their desires upon riches, even though dishonestly acquired. No man will part with the smallest fraction of the smallest coin, though entreated by a friend. Men of all degrees will conceit themselves to be equal with Brahmins. Cows will be held in esteem only as they supply milk, and not otherwise valued. The people will be almost always in dread of dearth and apprehensive of scarcity, and will hence ever be watching the appearances of the sky. They will all live like anchorets upon leaves and roots and fruit, and put a period to their lives through fear of famine and want. In truth, there will never be abundance in the Kali Yuga, and men will never enjoy pleasure and happiness. They will take their food without previous ablution, and without worshipping fire, gods, or offering obsequial libations to their progenitors. The women will be fickle, short of stature, gluttonous. They will have many children but little means. Scratching their heads with both hands, they will pay no attention to the interests of their husbands or parents. They will be selfish, abject, and slatternly. They will be scolds and liars. They will be indecent and immoral in their conduct, and will ever attach themselves to dissolute men. Youths, disregarding the rules, although disregarding the rules of studentship, will study the Vedas, if they study them at all. Householders will neither sacrifice nor practice becoming liberality. Anchorites will subsist upon food accepted from rustics, and mendicants will be influenced by regard for friends and associates, instead of being impartial as they should be. Princes, instead of protecting, will plunder their own subjects, and under the pretexts of levying customs, will rob merchants of their property. In the Kali Yuga, anyone who has chariots and elephants and steeds will be a Raja. Everyone who is feeble will be enslaved. Vaishyas will abandon agriculture and commerce, and gain a livelihood by servitude or the exercise of mechanical arts. Shudras, seeking a subsistence by begging, and assuming the outward marks of religious mendicants, will become the impure followers of impious and heretical doctrines. Oppressed by famine and taxation, men will desert their native lands and go to those countries which are fit for coarser grains. The path of the Vedas being obliterated, and men having deviated into heresy, iniquity will flourish, and the duration of life will therefore decrease. In consequence of horrible practices not enjoined by Scripture and of the vices of the rulers, many children will die in their infancy. Women will come to bear children at the age of 5, 6, or 7 years, and men beget them when they are 8, 9, or 10. A man will be gray when he is 12, and no one will exceed 20 years of life. Men will possess little sense, vigor, or virtue, and will therefore perish in a very brief period. In proportion as heresy extends, so, Maitreya, shall the progress of the Kali Yuga be estimated by the wise. In proportion as the number of the pious, who adhere to the lessons of the Vedas, diminishes, as the efforts of individuals who cultivate virtue relax, as the Adipurusha becomes no longer the object of yajnas, as respect for the teachers of the Vedas declines, and as regard is acknowledged for the disseminators of heresy, so may wise men note the augmented influence of the Kali Yuga. In the Kali Yuga, Maitreya, men corrupted by unbelievers will refrain from adoring Vishnu, the Lord of Yajna, the creator and Lord of all, and will say, of what authority are the Vedas? What are gods or Brahmins? What need is there of purification with water? Then will the clouds yield scanty rain. Then will the corn be light in ear, and the grain be poor and of little sap. Garments will be mostly made of the fibers of the san, or the Crotalaria juncea plant. The principle of trees will be the sami, the silk cotton tree. There's a significance to saying the principle of trees will be the sami. That may not be obvious why this would be a mark of Kali Yuga. It's a tree associated with the dead and inauspiciousness. Typically, groves of these trees are avoided. And to say the principle of trees will be this is sort of a poetic metaphor for generally a season of death and inauspiciousness. Hare Krishna, Sunil Ji. This chapter is the very first chapter of book 6 of the Vishnu Purana. The prevailing varna will be the Shudra. Indeed, almost everyone will be Shudras. Millet will be the more common grain. The milk in use will be chiefly that of goats. Unguents will be made from usira grass. The mother and father-in-law will be venerated in place of one's own parents, and a man's friends will be his brother-in-law, or one who has a wanton wife. Men will say, who has a father, who has a mother? Each one is born according to his deeds, and therefore they will look upon a wife's or husband's parents as their own. Endowed with little sense, men, subject to all the infirmities of mind, speech, and body, will daily commit sins, and everything that is calculated to afflict beings, vicious, impure, and wretched, will be generated in the Kali Yuga. In a very literal sense, then shall some places follow a separate duty, devoid of holy study, oblations of fire, and invocations of the gods. Then, in the Kali Yuga, shall a man acquire by a trifling exertion as much eminence and virtue as is the result of arduous tapas in the Krita Yuga, the age of purity. Chapter 2. Upon this subject, Maitreya, Parashara went on, you shall hear what the wise Vyasa has related, as it is communicated truly by me. So interestingly here, Parashara is quoting his own son as an authority. It was once a matter of dispute amongst the sages at what season the least moral merit obtained the greatest reward, and by whom it was most easily displayed. In order to terminate the discussion, they went to Veda Vyasa to remove their doubts. They found the illustrious Muni, my son, half immersed in the water of the Ganga, and awaiting the close of his ablutions, the sages remained on the banks of the sacred stream, under shelter of a grove of trees. As my son plunged down into the water, and again rose up from it, the Munis heard him exclaim, "Excellent is the Kali Yuga." Again he dived, and again rising, said, in their hearing, well done, Shudra, you are happy." Again he sank down, and as he emerged once more, they heard him say, well done, women, they are happy, who are more fortunate than they?" After this, my son finished his bathing, and the sages met him as he approached to welcome them. After he had given them seats and they had proffered their respects, the son of Satyavati said to them, this being Vyasa, "On what account have you come to me?" They replied, "We came to you to consult you on a subject on which we entertain some doubt, but that may be at present suspended. Explain to us something else. We heard you say, excellent is the Kali Yuga, well done Shudra, well done women. Now we are desirous to know why this was said, why you called them repeatedly happy. Tell us the meaning of it, if it be not a secret. We will then propose to you the question that occupies our thoughts." Being thus addressed by the Munis, Vyasa smiled and said to them, "Hear, excellent sages, why I uttered the words, well done, and so on. The fruit of tapas, of brahmacharya, of silent prayer, and the like." Silent prayer here being, what is being translated is manasika japa, or mental japa. Practiced in the Krita Yuga for 10 years, in the Treta for 1 year, in the Dvapara for a month, is obtained in the Kali Yuga in a day and night. Therefore did I exclaim, excellent, excellent is the Kali Yuga. That reward which a man obtains in the Krita by abstract meditation, in the Treta by yajna, in the Dvapara by adoration, he receives in the Kali by merely reciting the name of Keshava. In the Kali Yuga, man displays the most exalted virtue by every little exertion. Therefore, pious sages, who know what virtue is, I was pleased with the Kali Yuga. Formerly, the Vedas were to be acquired by the twice-born through the diligent observances of self-denial, and it was their duty to celebrate yajnas conformably to the ritual. Then idle prayers, idle feasts, and fruitless ceremonies were practiced, but to mislead the twice-born. For although observed by them devoutly, yet in consequence of some irregularity in their celebration, sin was incurred in all their works, and what they ate or what they drank did not affect the fulfillment of their desires. In all their objects, the twice-born enjoyed no independence, and they attained their respective spheres only with exceeding pain. The Shudra, on the contrary, more fortunate than they, reaches his assigned station by rendering them service, and performing merely the yajna of preparing food, in which no rules determine what may or may not be eaten, what may or may not be drunk. Therefore, most excellent sages is the Shudra fortunate. Riches are accumulated by men in modes not incompatible with their peculiar duties, and they are then to be bestowed upon the worthy and expended in constant yajna. There is great trouble in their acquisition and great grief for their loss. Thus, eminent Brahmins, through these and other sources of anxiety, men attain their allotted spheres of Prajapati and the rest only by exceeding labor and suffering. This is not the case for women. A woman has only to honor her husband in act, thought, and speech, to reach the same region to which he is elevated through great labor, and she thus accomplishes her object without such great exertion. This was the purport of my exclamation, "Well done," the third time. I have thus related to you what you asked. Now demand the question you came to put to me, in any way you please, and I will make you a distinct reply. The Munis then said to Vyasa, "The question we intended to have asked you has already been answered by you in your reply to our previous inquiry." On hearing this, Krishna Dvaipayana laughed and said to the holy persons who had come to see him, whose eyes were wide open with astonishment, "I perceived, with the eye of divine knowledge, the question you intended to ask, and in answering to it, I uttered the expressions, 'Well done, well done.' In truth, in the Kali Yuga, duty is discharged with very little trouble for mortals, whose faults are all washed away by the water of their individual merits. By Shudras, through diligent attendance only upon the twice-born, and by women, through only a slight effort of obedience to their husbands. Therefore, Brahmanas, did I thrice express my admiration of their happiness, for in the Krita and other ages great were the toils of the regenerate to perform their duty. I waited not for your inquiry, but replied at once to the question you intended to ask. Now, ye know what virtue is. What else do you wish me to tell you?" The Munis then saluted and praised Vyasa, and being freed by him from their uncertainty, they departed as they came. To you also, excellent Maitreya, have I imparted this secret, this one great virtue of the otherwise vicious Kali Yuga. The dissolution of the world and the aggregation of the elements, I will now describe to you. Chapter 3. The dissolution of existing beings is of three kinds: incidental, elemental, and absolute. The first is called Naimittaka, the occasional or incidental dissolution, or the Brahmya, as it is occasioned by the intervals of Brahma's days and nights. The destruction of creatures, though not of the substance of the world, occurring during Brahma's night. The general resolution of the elements into their primitive source, or prakriti, is the prakritaka destruction, which occurs at the end of Brahma's life. The third, the absolute or final, or the atyantika, is the annihilation of the individuality forever, which is moksha, exemption forever from future existence, as an individual bound within the manifesting cycles of samsara. Maitreya said, "Tell me, excellent master, what is the enumeration of a parardha, the expiration of two of which is the period of the elemental dissolution?" Parashara continued, "A parardha, Maitreya, is that number which occurs in the 18th place of figures enumerated according to the rule of decimal notation." At the end of twice that period, elemental dissolution occurs, when all the discrete products of nature are withdrawn into their indiscrete source. The shortest period of time is a matra, which is equal to the twinkling of the human eye, or in other words, the duration of one blink. 15 matras make a kashta, 30 kashtas, one kala, 15 kalas, one nadika. A nadika is ascertained with by a measure of water, with a vessel made of 12 palas and a half of copper, in the bottom of which there is to be a hole made with a tube of gold at the weight of 4 mashas and 4 inches long. According to the Magadha measure, the vessel should hold 1 prasta, or 16 palas of water. 2 of these nadis make 1 muhurta, 30 of which are 1 day and night. 30 such periods form a month, 12 months make a year, or a day and night of the devas, and 360 such days constitute a year of the celestial devas. An aggregate of 4 yugas contains 12,000 deva years, and 1,000 periods of 4 yugas complete 1 day of Brahma. That period is also termed a kalpa, during which 14 manus preside, each in turn. And at the end of it occurs the incidental or Brahma dissolution. The nature of this dissolution is very fearful. Hear me describe it, as well as that which takes place at the elemental dissolution, which I shall also relate to you. At the end of 1,000 periods of 4 yugas, the earth is for the most part exhausted. A total dearth then ensues, which lasts 100 years, and in consequence of the failure of any food to emerge from the earth, all beings become languid and exanimate, and at the last, they all entirely perish. The eternal Vishnu then assumes the character of Rudra the Destroyer, and descends to reunite all his creatures with himself. He enters into the 7 rays of the sun, drinks up all the waters of the globe, and causes all moisture whatever, in formerly living bodies or in the soil, to evaporate, thus drying up the whole earth. The seas, the rivers, the mountain torrents and springs are all exhausted, and so are all the waters of Patala, the regions below the earth. Thus fed through his intervention with abundant moisture, the 7 solar rays dilate to 7 suns. The commentator, Parashara does not give these 7 rays of fire their names, but the commentator quotes them from the Vedas as being named Araga, Braja, Patala, Patanga, Svamabhak, Jyotishmat, and Savibhasha. Their radiance glows above, below, and on every side, and sets the 3 worlds and Patala on fire. The 3 worlds, consumed by these suns, become rugged and deformed through the whole extent of their mountains, rivers, and seas, and the earth, bare of verdure and destitute of moisture, alone remains, resembling in appearance the bare shell of a tortoise. The destroyer of all things, Hari in the form of Rudra, who is the Kalagni, the flame of time, becomes the scorching breath of the serpent Shesha, and thereby reduces Patala to ashes, since it emerges from Shesha, who is below Patala, so it comes from beneath. The great fire, when it has burnt all the divisions of Patala, proceeds to the earth and consumes it also. A vast whirlpool of eddying flame then spreads to the region of the atmosphere, to the Bhuvarloka, and then to the sphere of the Devas, Svargaloka, and wraps them in fiery ruin. The 3 spheres show like a frying pan amidst the surrounding flames that prey upon all movable or stationary things. The inhabitants of the 2 upper spheres, having discharged their functions and being annoyed by the heat, removed the sphere above, or Maharaloka. When that becomes heated, its tenants, who after the full period of their stay are desirous of ascending to higher regions, depart for the Janaloka. Janardana, in the person of Rudra, having consumed the whole world, breathes forth heavy clouds, and those called samvarta, resembling vast elephants in bulk, overspread the sky, roaring and darting lightnings. Some are as black as the blue lotus, some are white as the water lily, some are dusky like smoke, and some are yellow. Some are of a dun color like that of an ass, some like ashes sprinkled on the forehead. Some are deep blue as the lapis lazuli, some azure like the sapphire, some are white as the conch or the jasmine, and some are black as collyrium. Some are of bright red like the ladybird, some are of the fierceness of red arsenic, and some are like the wing of the painted jay. Such are these massy clouds in hue. In form, some resemble towns, some mountains, some are like horses and hovels, and some are like columns. Mighty in size and loud in thunder, they fill all space. Showering down torrents of water, these clouds quench the dreadful fires which consume the three worlds. And then they rain uninterruptedly for 100 years and deluge the whole world. Pouring down in drops as large as dice, these rains overspread the earth and fill the middle region and inundate heaven. The world is now enveloped in darkness, and all things, animate or inanimate, having perished. The clouds continue to pour down their waters for more than 100 years. Chapter 4. When the waters have reached the region of the Saptarishis, and the whole of the three worlds is one ocean, they stop. The breath of Vishnu becomes a strong wind, which blows for more than 100 years, until all the clouds are dispersed. The wind is then reabsorbed, and he of whom all things are made, the Lord by whom all things exist, he who is inconceivable without beginning of the universe, reposes, sleeping upon Shesha in the midst of the deep. The Creator Hari sleeps upon the ocean in the form of Brahma, glorified by Sanaka and the saints who had gone to the Janaloka, and contemplated by the holy inhabitants of Brahmaloka, anxious for final liberation. Involved in mystic slumber, the celestial personification of his own illusions, and meditating on his own ineffable spirit, which is called Vasudeva. This Maitreya is the dissolution termed the incidental, because Hari, in the form of Brahma, sleeps there as its incidental cause. When the universal spirit wakes, the world revives. When he closes his eyes, all things fall upon the bed of mystic slumber. In like manner as 1,000 great ages constitute a day of Brahma, 1,000 great ages, or Mahayugas, referring to one Mahayuga is a cycle of the 4 yugas. So his night consists of the same period, during which the world is submerged by the vast ocean. Awaking at the end of his night, the unborn Vishnu, in the character of Brahma, creates the universe anew, in the manner formerly related to you. I have thus described to you the intermediate dissolution of the world occurring at the end of every kalpa. I will now, Maitreya, describe to you the elemental dissolution. When by dearth and fire all the worlds and patalas are withered up, and the modifications of Mahat and other products of nature are all by the will of Krishna destroyed, the progress of elemental dissolution is begun. Then first the waters swallow up the property of earth. So this is not referring to the flooding of the earth as just described in the incidental dissolution. The waters swallow up the property of earth. The earth element is itself ceases to exist within the universe at all. It is reabsorbed into the subtler tattva of Apa. Swallow up the property of earth, which is the rudiment of smell, and earth deprived of its property proceeds to destruction. And by destruction here we mean demanifestation, dissolution. Devoid of the rudiment of odor, the earth becomes one with water. The waters, then being much augmented, roaring and rushing along, fill up all space, whether agitated or still. When the universe is thus pervaded by the waves of the watery element, its rudimental flavor is licked up by the element of fire, and in consequence of the destruction of their rudiments, the waters themselves are destroyed or dissolved. Deprived of the essential rudiment of flavor, they become one with fire, and the universe is therefore entirely filled with flame, which drinks up the water on every side and gradually overspreads the whole of the world. While space is enveloped in flame, above, below, and all around, the element of wind seizes upon the rudimental property or form, which is the cause of light, and that being withdrawn, all becomes of the nature of air. The rudiment of form being destroyed, and fire deprived of its rudiment, air extinguishes fire and spreads resistlessly over space, which is deprived of light when fire merges into air. Air then, accompanied by sound, which is the source of ether, extends everywhere through the 10 regions of space until ether seizes upon contact, its rudimental property, by the loss of which air is destroyed, and ether remains unmodified. Devoid of form, flavor, touch, and smell, it exists unembodied and vast, and pervades the whole of space. Ether, akasha, whose characteristic property and rudiment is sound, exists alone, occupying all the vacuity of space. But then the radical elements of egotism devour sound, and all the elements and faculties are at once merged into their original. This primary element is consciousness, combined with the property of darkness, or tamas, and is itself swallowed up by mahat, whose characteristic property is intelligence, and earth and mahat are the inner and outer boundaries of the universe, the first and the last principle in the sequence of emergence. In this manner, as in the creation, were the 7 forms of prakriti reckoned from mahat to earth. So at the time of elemental dissolution, these 7 successively re-enter into each other. The egg of Brahma, the Brahmanda, is dissolved in the waters that surround it with its 7 zones, 7 oceans, 7 regions, and their mountains. The investure of water is drunk up by fire, the stratum of fire is absorbed by that of air, the air blends itself with ether, the primary element of egotism devours the ether, and is itself taken up by intellect, which along with all these is seized upon by prakriti. Equilibrium of the 3 gunas, without excess or deficiency, is called nature, prakriti, hetu or origin, pradhana, the chief principle, karana, the cause, param, the supreme. This prakriti is essentially the same, whether discrete or indiscrete. Only that which is discrete is finally lost or absorbed in the indiscrete. Spirit also, which is one, pure, imperishable, eternal, all-pervading, is a portion of that supreme spirit, which is all things. That spirit which is other than embodied spirit, in which there are no attributes of name, species, or the like, which is one with all wisdom, and is to be understood as sole existence, that is Brahman, infinite glory, supreme spirit, supreme power, Vishnu, all that is, from whence the perfect sage returns no more. Prakriti, which I have described to you as being essentially both discrete and indiscrete, and spirit, which is united with body, both resolve into supreme spirit. Supreme spirit is the upholder of all things and the ruler of all things, and is glorified in the Vedas and in the Vedanta by the name of Vishnu. Works, as enjoined by the Vedas, are of 2 kinds, active or pravritta, and quiescent or nivritta, by both of which the universal person is worshipped by humankind. He, the Lord of Yajna, the Yajna Purusha, the most excellent Purusha, is worshipped by men in the active modes of rites enjoined in the Rik, Yajur, and Sama Vedas. The soul of wisdom, the person of wisdom, Vishnu, giver of emancipation, is worshipped by sages in the quiescent form through meditative devotion. The exhaustless Vishnu is whatever thing that is designated by short, long, or prolated syllables, or that which is without a name. He is that which is discrete and that which is indiscrete. He is exhaustless spirit, supreme spirit, universal spirit, Hari, the wearer of universal forms. Nature, whether discrete or indiscrete, is absorbed into him, and detached spirit also merges into the all-diffusive and unobstructed spirit. The period of 2 pararthas, as I have described it to you, Maitreya, is called a day of that potent Vishnu, And whilst the products of nature are merged into their source, nature into spirit, and spirit into the supreme, that period is termed his night, and is of equal duration with his day. But in fact, to that eternal supreme spirit there is neither day nor night, and these distinctions are only figuratively, and not literally, applied to the Almighty. I have thus explained to you the nature of elemental dissolution, and will now expound to you which is final. Chapter 5. The wise man, having investigated the three kinds of worldly pain, or mental and bodily affliction and the like, and having acquired true wisdom and detachment from human objects, obtains final dissolution. The first of the three pains, or adhyatmika, is of two kinds, bodily and mental. Bodily pain is of many kinds, as you shall hear. Affections of the head, catarrh, fever, colic, fistula, spleen, hemorrhoids, intumescence, sickness, ophthalmia, dysentery, leprosy, and many other diseases constitute examples of bodily affliction. Mental sufferings are love, anger, fear, hate, covetousness, stupefaction, despair, sorrow, malice, disdain, jealousy, envy, and many other passions which are engendered in the mind. These and various other afflictions, mental or corporeal, are comprised under the class of worldly sufferings, which is called adhyatmika, natural and inseparable. That pain to which, excellent Brahman, the term adibhotika, natural but incidental, is applied is every kind of evil which is inflicted from without upon men, by beasts, birds, other men, goblins, snakes, fiends, reptiles. And the pain that is termed adhidevika is the work of cold, heat, wind, rain, lightning, and other such atmospherical phenomena. Affliction, Maitreya, is multiplied in thousands of shapes, in the progress of conception, birth, decay, disease, death, and naraka. The tender and subtle animal exists in the embryo, surrounded by abundant filth, floating in water, and distorted in its back, neck, and bones, enduring severe pain even in the course of its development, as disordered by the acid, acrid, bitter, pungent, and saline articles of its mother's food, incapable of extending or contracting its limbs, reposing amidst the slime of ordure and urine, every way incommoded, unable to breathe, endowed with consciousness and calling to memory many hundreds of previous births. Thus exists the embryo in profound affliction, bound to the world by its former karmas. When the child is about to be born, its face is besmeared by excrement, urine, blood, mucus, and semen, or the rudiments of such bodily fluids. Its attachment to the uterus is ruptured by the Prajapati wind. It is turned head downwards and violently expelled from the womb by the powerful and painful forces of parturition, and the infant, losing for a time all sensation when brought in contact with the external air, is immediately deprived of its intellectual knowledge. Thus born, the child is tortured in every limb, as if pierced with thorns or cut to pieces with a saw, and falls from its fetid lodgment as if from a sore, like a crawling thing upon the earth. Unable to feel itself, unable to turn itself, it is dependent upon the will of others for being bathed and nourished. Laid upon a dirty bed, it is bitten by insects and mosquitoes, and has not power to drive them away. Many are the pangs attending birth, and many are those which succeed to birth, and many are the sufferings which are inflicted by elemental and superhuman agency in the state of childhood. Enveloped by the gloom of ignorance and internally bewildered, man knows not whence he is, who he is, whither he goes, nor what is his nature, by what bonds he is bound, what is cause and what is not cause, what is to be done and what is to be left undone, what is to be said and what is to be kept silent, what is righteousness, what is iniquity, in what it consists or how, what is right, what is wrong, what is virtue, what is vice. Thus man, like a brute beast addicted only to animal gratifications, suffers the pain that ignorance occasions. Ignorance, darkness, inactivity influence those devoid of knowledge, so that pious works are neglected. But naraka is the consequence, according to the great sages, and the ignorant therefore suffer affliction both in this world and in the next. When old age arrives, the body is infirm, the limbs are relaxed or are deprived of strength. The face is emaciate and shriveled, the skin is wrinkled, and scantily covers the veins and sinews. The eye discerns not afar off, and the pupil gazes on vacuity. The nostrils are stuffed with hair. The trunk trembles as it moves. The bones appear beneath the surface. The back is bowed, and the joints are bent. The digestive fire is extinct, and here is little appetite and little vigor. Walking, rising, sleeping, sitting become painful efforts. The ear is dull. The eye is dim. The mouth is disgusting with dribbling saliva. The senses no longer are obedient to the will, and as death approaches, the things that are perceived even are immediately forgotten. The utterance of a single sentence becomes fatiguing. Wakefulness is perpetuated by difficult breathing, coughing, and painful exhaustion. The old man is lifted up by somebody else. He is clothed by somebody else. He is an object of contempt to his servants, his children, his wife. Incapable of cleanliness, of amusement or food or desire, he is laughed at by his dependents and disregarded by his kin. And dwelling on the exploits of his youth as if on the actions of a past life, he sighs deeply and is sorely distressed. Such are some of the pains which old age may condemn one to suffer. I will now describe to you the agonies of death. The neck droops, the feet and hands are relaxed, the body trembles. The man is repeatedly exhausted, subdued, and visited with interrupted knowledge. The principle of selfishness afflicts him, and he thinks, what will become of my wealth, my lands, my children, my wife, my servants, my house? The joints of his limbs are tortured with severe pains as if cut by a saw, or as if they were pierced by the sharp arrows of the destroyer. He rolls his eyes and tosses about his hands and feet. His lips and palate are parched and dry, and his throat, obstructed by foul humors and deranged vital airs, emits a rattling sound. He is afflicted with burning heat, and with thirst and with hunger, and he at last passes away, tortured by the servants of the judge of the dead, to undergo a renewal of his sufferings in another body. These are the agonies which men may have to endure when they die. I will now describe to you the tortures which they suffer in Naraka. Men are bound when they die, if of course their karma is extremely bad. Just as all of this has been essentially describing worst case potential scenarios. The worst case is that they would be bound by the servants of the Raja of Naraka with cords and beaten with sticks, and have then to encounter the fierce aspect of Yama and the horrors of their terrible route. In the different Narakas, there are various intolerable tortures with burning sand, fire, machines, and weapons. Some are served with saws, some roasted in forges, some are chopped with axes, some buried in the ground, some are mounted on stakes, some cast to wild beasts to be devoured. Some are gnawed by vultures, some torn by tigers, some boiled in oil, some rolled in caustic slime, some are precipitated from great heights, some tossed upwards by engines. The number of punishments inflicted in Naraka, which are the consequences of one's own sins or harmful actions, is infinite. But not in Naraka alone do the souls of the deceased undergo pain. There is no cessation even in Svarga, for its temporary inhabitant is ever tormented with the prospect of descending again to earth. Again, he is liable to conception and to birth. He is merged again into the embryo, and repairs to it when about to be born. Then he dies as soon as born, or in infancy, or in youth, or in manhood, or in old age. Death, sooner or later, is inevitable. As long as he lives, he is immersed in manifold afflictions, like the seed of the cotton amidst the down that is to be spun into thread. In acquiring, losing, and preserving wealth, there are many griefs, and so there are in the misfortunes of our friends. Whatever is produced that is cost acceptable to man, that, Maitreya, becomes a seed whence springs the tree of sorrow. Wife, children, servants, house, lands, riches contribute much more to the misery than to the happiness of mankind. Where could man, scorched by the fires of the sun of this world, look for felicity, were it not for the shade afforded by the tree of emancipation? Attainment of the divine being is considered by the wise as the remedy of the threefold class of ills that beset the different stages of life, conception, birth, and decay, as characterized by that only happiness which effacts all other kinds of felicity, however abundant, and as the only one which is absolute and final. It should therefore be the assiduous endeavor of the wise to attain unto God. The means of such attainment are said, Mahamuni, to be knowledge and works. Knowledge is of two kinds, that which is derived from scripture and that which is derived from reflection or one's own experience. Brahman, that is the word, is composed of scripture. In other words, the Shabda Brahman, composed of scripture, composed of mantra, the Shabda Brahman, composed of the sounds of the Vedas. Brahman, that is supreme, is produced of reflection. In other words, that the shallower Brahman is that composed of by the mantras. The supreme Brahman is that which is composed of consciousness reflecting upon itself. Ignorance is utter darkness, in which ignorance obtained through any sense, in which knowledge obtained through any sense, shines like a lamp. But the knowledge that is derived from reflection breaks upon the obscurity like the sun. In other words, that knowledge which is obtained through reflection upon one's experiences is overwhelmingly greater than just sensory data. It's a much higher class of knowledge, vijnana, as opposed to jnana. What has been said by Manu when appealing to the meaning of the Vedas with respect to the subject, I will repeat to you. There are two forms of spirit or God, the spirit which is the word and the spirit which is supreme. He who is thoroughly imbued with the word of God obtains supreme spirit. Thus, Brahman is spoken of two kinds, Shabda Brahman, the spirit to be obtained through the Vedas, and Para Brahman, to be obtained through reflection upon the self. The Atharva Veda also states that there are two kinds of knowledge. By the one which is the supreme, God is attained. The other is that which consists of the Rik and other Vedas. That which is imperceptible, undecaying, inconceivable, unborn, inexhaustible, indescribable, which has neither form nor hands nor feet, which is almighty, omnipresent, eternal, the cause of all things and without cause itself, permeating all, itself unpenetrated and from which all things proceed. That is the object which the wise behold. That is Brahman. That is the supreme state. That is the subject of contemplation to those who desire liberation. That is the thing spoken of by the Vedas, the infinitely subtle, supreme condition of Vishnu. That essence of the supreme is defined by the term Bhagavat. The word Bhagavat is the denomination of that primeval and eternal God, and he who fully understands the meaning of that expression, Bhagavat, is possessed of holy wisdom, the sum and substance of the three Vedas. The word Bhagavat is a convenient form to be used in the adoration of that supreme being, to whom no term is applicable, and therefore Bhagavat expresses that supreme spirit, which is individual, almighty, and the cause of causes of all things. The letter Bh implies the cherishes and supporter of the universe. By Ga is understood the leader, impeller, or creator. The dissyllable Bhaga indicates the six properties: dominion, might, glory, splendor, wisdom, and dispassion. The purport of the letter Va is that elemental spirit in which all beings exist and which exists in all beings. These interpretations are all drawn from the Nirukta of the Vedas. And thus, this great word, Bhagavan, is the name of Vasudeva, who is one with the supreme Brahman and of no one else. This word, therefore, which is the general denomination of an adorable object, is not used in reference to the supreme in a general, but in a special signification. When applied to any other thing, it is used in its customary or general import. In the latter case, it may purport one who knows the origin and end and revolutions of beings, and what is wisdom, what is ignorance. But in the former, when used to refer to Parabrahman, it denotes wisdom, energy, power, dominion, might, and glory without end and without defect. In other words, all of those qualities to an infinite and perfect extent. The term Vasudeva means that all beings abide in that supreme being, and he abides in all beings. As was formerly explained by Keshidhvaja to Kandikya, called Janaka, when he inquired of him an explanation of the name of the immortal Vasudeva. He said, Keshidhvaja said, he dwells internally in all beings, and all things dwell in him, and thence the Lord Vasudeva is the creator and preserver of the world. He, though one with all beings, is beyond and separate from the material nature of Prakriti, from its products, from its properties, from its imperfections. He is beyond all investing substance. He is universal soul. All the interstices of the universe are filled up by him. He is one with all good qualities, and all created beings are endowed with but a small portion of his individuality. Assuming at will various forms, he bestows benefits on the whole world, which was his work. Glory, might, dominion, wisdom, energy, power, and other attributes are collected in him. Supreme of the supreme, in whom no imperfections abide, Lord over finite and infinite, God in individuals and universals, visible and invisible, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, almighty, the wisdom, perfect, pure, supreme, undefiled, and one only, by which he is conceived, contemplated, and known. That is wisdom. All else is ignorance. And I think that might be a good place to stop, because from here we get into a longer discourse by the great Guru Keshidhvaja to Khandikya Janaka. And so I think we can dive into the depth of that discourse next time, which will probably also finish the entire Vishnu Purana, since that discourse is pretty much the only thing left. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thanks so much, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. I had a question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Cool, thank you. Inhabitants of the upper two spheres removed to the sphere above Mahaloka.
Yeah, well, this mirror, this
higher Janaloka. What was that talking? And then saints? Are those saints, or who is that? And when is that?
Saints and devas, yes. So at the pralaya that occurs at the end of a kalpa, when at the stage when, so first there's the famine that kills everything on earth and below the earth, and then a drought that evaporates its water, and then the fire rises up from the underworld, the fire of Sheshanaga. That was all described. At the time when the fire comes rising up, it destroys everything in the Bhuloka, first in the Patalas, up, then to the Bhuloka, then to the Bhuvarloka. At that time, the two worlds that are described are Svargaloka and Maharaloka. Svargaloka gets destroyed by fire. Maharaloka, the fire does not reach Maharaloka, but the heat does. The beings of Svargaloka and Maharaloka are able to escape. They move up to Janaloka to take refuge from the fire of Pralaya that consumes the lower worlds. So that's what's being described there. So the beings, those beings are the devas of Indra survive, of Svarga, and the inhabitants of the Maharaloka. Those are mostly saints, sages, Prajapatis, and some other types of devas. There's a lot of high spiritual beings, but essentially devas and high sages who dwell in higher lokas. Higher lokas, but not the highest. The ones up in the highest loka are far unaffected by any of this, but it's far higher than us, for sure. Devas and high sages have to move at that time because some of the worlds are destroyed by the fire. but they are able to move up to Jana Loka, which is unaffected. So that's what that was referring to.
Yeah, it's just a cool like concept and illustration of, you know, honey, I think we should get a new place.
Yes,
You
yes,
know?
exactly. Because
Different-
the entire universe below us is on fire. Yes.
I was thinking maybe we should start looking for other real estate in another loka.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because the Svargaloka gets completely destroyed in the fire, and the Maharaloka gets the fire doesn't actually touch Maharaloka, but it does become inhospitably hot.
And us humans are just like boo loka or whatever we call it here is just that we're long gone.
We're gone hundreds of years before then. We've all died in famine. Yeah. Yeah. No living all this elemental destruction, the deluge and the clouds and the fire and all of that, no living beings on Earth actually see that. They all starve to death long before. That all happens to a barren and lifeless Earth.
Now, but that also it's interesting when we're like, well, how can we move up, right? You know, how can we like get a promotion to like, you know, get up into a higher loka, right?
Yeah,
but
sure.
then now wasn't talking about that early on when we started reading today. It's talking about the scale of the yugas. You know, Vyasa was talking or something, right? And he was talking about how. Could you go into that a little bit of like he's talking about like how in Kali Yuga, you know, one day it went by kind of fast, but it was like one day of penance in Kali Yuga is worth like, you know, 1,000 years of penance in Sahat Yuga or something like that.
It scales by yuga. Yes, progress can be much more rapid. So you hear in these old stories of sages in Satya Yuga, of course, they had lifespans of thousands of years, so they were able to do this. But you hear of them spending, you know, 1,000 years, multiple thousands of years doing tapas, trying to make spiritual progress and get enlightened. And many of them succeeded, but very, very slowly. Progress now is possible to make much more rapidly. Everything is more rapid. The lifespan is incredibly condensed. The pace of life is much faster, but the progress, spiritual progress made through sadhana, the potential spiritual progress is also much faster. It's just kind of the nature of the Kali Yuga that all the processes are much quicker.
So when we're talking about, oh well, you better be in Maharloka to like get the heck out of here when that heat wave comes through, like according to the Yuga scale, maybe we'll be able to, you know, just chant Hare Krishna, Hare Rama a couple times and clear everything up enough to get up to a higher Yuga Loka. But like, you know, like that's kind of the point, right? Like we can, there's more of a opportunity if we do stick to our regimen and we do go do our yoga meditation, it like goes further, I guess, in Kali Yuga right now.
Yes, exactly. Well, it goes faster.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And then of course, you know, you think about something like the Maharishi effect, and you're like, I wonder like if the Maharishi effect would not lower crime in Washington D.C. With a bunch of meditators in Sat Yuga as quickly. Yeah, I wonder, would that be, you know what I'm saying? Like if 8,000 people meditated in Washington D.C., would the crime rate go down as quickly if it was Treta Yuga, or would that effect happen 10 years later? Anyways.
Yeah, that I'm not sure. Of course, there would very likely be almost no crime to begin with in those yugas, which would be the huge advantage. But yeah, as to that exact, I'm not sure. That's talking about a somewhat different effect of sadhana. That's talking about actually no. Actually, as I think about this, I think I do know the answer. That's not talking about spiritual progress that you are making in the internal progress of the Sataka. That is talking about yajñapala, the fruits of a yajña affecting the outside world. The effect would that would be stronger in previous yugas. The effect would be greater, not lesser.
Okay, this It's interesting though, like especially like Agnihotra too, same thing where you're like, oh, well, it's got this great atmospheric, even social effect.
That effect would be
But
greater in previous yugas. The internal spiritual progress of the jivan toward moksha can be faster in Kali Yuga, but the external progress of the fruits of yajnas becoming manifest in the outer world, that is a much stronger effect in previous yugas.
it's like it's denser. It's like the atmosphere is denser, heavier, and the the Maharishi effect or whatever you want to, your eminence, your emanations of positive energy, like they get weighted down or something in the heavier, darker yugas. It seems maybe.
Yeah. I think that's a good description of it. Yeah.
Jeez. Cool. Well, that's really interesting. Thanks,
Yeah.
Devalo.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you.
Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna. Happy full moon.
Yeah. Happy Purnima.
Yay.